There will not be a new winner of the ASEAN Hyundai Cup because the four sides that have won it throughout the tournament's history over the last 30 years will be meeting each other once again in the semi finals.
Mm.
And in this clash, we are talking about the two sides who historically have won this tournament the most. Welcome back to DNQ. If you are new to the channel, this is our bread and butter. We talk about the international underdogs, the Minnow nations, the sleeping giants from around the world. And today we are talking about Singapore versus Thailand in the ASEAN Hyundai Cup semi-final. Ryan, I'm going to hand straight over to you to talk about that side that maybe we've underrated throughout this tournament, Singapore. How's their tournament gone so far?
Singapore, my friend, Singapore's route to the semi-final, you could argue, has been the the opposite of spectacular,
Mm.
functional, shall we
Mm-hmm.
say. You could argue they were fortunate, as we've said. For those that are joining us for the first time, we've done a few videos on the ASEAN Cup 2026 so far, where we've touched on a few of these things. Those that are joining us once again, you will have heard us mention they were fortunate enough to escape the first game against Cambodia with all 3 points. They did comfortably deal with Timor-Leste, but the 2-0 victory was, let's just say, they scored a lot less than every other team that faced Timor. Then, however, they produced two excellent survival game management performances against Vietnam and Indonesia. So far in the group, they played four, they've won two, they have drawn two. I think the biggest compliment you can give Gavin Lee's side is they know what type of team they are. They don't need huge possession. They remain compact. They're comfortable off the ball, and that, mate, has seen them through what we discussed in our preview that we thought was the slightly trickier group, um, and and into a semi-final, my friend. What about Thailand? Thailand have done things a little bit more, I don't know if spectacular is the word, but they've certainly showed their class on this stage that they so often do.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I would say Thailand, obviously the tournament, the side that won this tournament, should I say, the most amount of times with seven victories. Whilst I would agree, they've played four, they've won four, they've not conceded a goal. It's been quite straightforward for them.
Hmm. Hmm.
There haven't been any of those score lines that are outlandish, right? That really kind of shock you into, oh my goodness, Thailand have produced this incredible victory. Like Vietnam, who we'll talk about in the other semi-final, they started the tournament, Vietnam, with a 7-0 win, for example, against Timor, and it's immediately they've come out and shown this. With Thailand, they've also been quite efficient. They've just won their games, and I think even though they are without a few players that we've seen historically throughout this tournament, of course, Tirasil Dangda being the key player who's no longer in
Hmm.
this side, the tournament's all-time top scorer. What they showed, particularly against the Philippines, is that little bit of squad depth, and they've shown themselves to just quietly be that level above. 8 changes in that game against the Philippines and still got it over the line with that victory. In debatably, yes, the easier group than Group A, Thailand, but you still got to go out there and win it. And of course, they have won every single game. So again, not dissimilar to Singapore in the fact that it's not been overly spectacular. The key difference, though, probably being just that level of just ultimately the overall level of the squad and the ability
Yeah,
to just win games and get games over the line.
yeah. They've blended new additions to the squad with some experienced faces, and have cruised through, have been comfortable, even as you said, making loads of changes, and that's, I mean, that's great for Thailand football.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, not just for the here and now in this tournament, the fact that they've got depth, and they have eased through the group stage. Now, if you were to guess, my friend, how many out of the last 10 meetings between these two countries, how many Thailand
Mm.
have won, What would you guess that as out of the last 10 times Singapore have met Thailand? How many have Thailand won?
That's going to be really interesting because given the history of Thailand and their success in this tournament, being one of the highest ranked teams of this as well, I'd probably err on the side of, I'm going to say 6 victories out of the 10 for Thailand.
Thailand won the last 10, mate. Singapore's last victory against Thailand came all the way back in December 2012. And that particular result has some relevance because it was the 2012 ASEAN Championship final where Singapore won the home leg 3-1. Thailand won the second leg 1-0, but Singapore held on for the 3-2 aggregate victory. They also met in the 2007 final where Singapore again beat Thailand over 2 legs to win the tournament. But most recently, mate, Thailand have dominated. At the 2024 ASEAN Champs, Thailand went to Singapore and won 4-2, despite Singapore taking a 2-0 lead in that one. And their most recent meeting in any kind came in November of last year when they Thailand beat Singapore 3-2 in a friendly. So whilst Singapore have got some notable historical victories against Thailand, the recent history is very, very favourable to Thailand, which doesn't surprise me. It didn't, it didn't surprise me when I was looking at this earlier, pal. Especially how dominant Thailand have been alongside Vietnam in this tournament across the recent editions. How do you see this one going, mate? I guess we're going to talk about both legs here, so it makes a sort of a slightly interesting conversation tactically because I don't think with Singapore. I think they have to go into the second leg with some sort of lead. And we've seen when they have played both Vietnam and Indonesia in the group stages, when they've ground out those 0-0 and 1-1 draws, they've been quite reserved. They've been quite defensive. They haven't been, I don't know, I guess aggressively offensive or anything like that. So how do you see them slightly changing that? Do you see Gavin Lee changing that approach for the first leg to give them a chance going into the second leg? How do you see it going?
I don't think so, because I think you touched on it earlier on. This is a team almost built for tournament football, really. You don't historically you don't win tournaments by blowing every other team out of the water with 4-0 victories, right? The way that you progress through tournaments is going into the game and getting the result that you need. And Singapore have done that in every single game, right? A draw against Vietnam gave them the edge over Indonesia, meant Indonesia had to beat them in the final game. And again, despite going 1-0 down, which I thought might be a little bit nail in the coffin for Singapore in that game.
I agree.
They then bounced back. I do think that Thailand are still strong favourites across 2 legs.
Yeah.
I actually think if this was a single legger, I would be really unsure because I actually back Singapore's game management to potentially give them the edge over a single-legged game. I just feel like over 180 minutes, that kind of determination to not concede and be resilient and then be very, very clinical in attack is going to be quite hard against this Thailand side. It is worth noting, Singapore, they've only conceded 2 goals all tournament.
Yeah.
And in the first game where they conceded to Cambodia, came back and won. In the second game that they conceded in against Indonesia, came back and got the draw. So points from losing positions being 4 to them. I think it would be foolish to write them off, but I also think it would be remiss of them to change their own tactical setup to something that they would be less comfortable with.
Just a couple of other things to throw out there. So they're at home in the first leg. They're not playing at the national stadium, unavailable due to following the national day basically. So they are at a stadium called Jalan Besar, which has only got a 6,000 capacity. However, I thought the atmosphere at that ground for the Indonesia game was pretty strong. So
Yeah.
I think that tight environment might make it. I don't see that as a huge negative. I I think that they will, especially in the first leg. I think they'll be patient and reserved. And part of me, mate, thinks that they will just lean on the approach that's got them strong results. I say strong results, the draws against both Vietnam and Indonesia, keeping everything really, really solid. They're going to have to rely on the goalkeeper. Can't remember the guy's name, but he had a cracking game against Vietnam. He's going to need to have another good game. Fandy's going to need to play a role up front.
Ilhan. We must call him Ilhan. Fandy is the paternal name. People have told me in the comments. So
okay.
It's
Ilhan
one of those.
will need to have. He'll need to have another. He'll need to have another strong performance. Anwar is dangerous in transitions. But if I was to call it now, mate, I'd go 1-1. My prediction is going to be 1-1 in the first leg. Thailand to win 1-0 in the second leg, and Thailand to edge it to make the final in this one, mate. What do you think?
I am going to do what we've threatened to do on DNQ here, and that is to disagree with you.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Okay.
Here we go.
Seriously,
I'm going to disagree. There's no away goals rule in this, right? So the scoreline doesn't matter in each game. If both games are a draw, or the aggregate score is the same, it will progress to extra time and pens in the second leg. I actually am going to back Singapore to cause a big, big upset here.
Wow.
Across the two legs. And my reason for doing that is because I was very pro Singapore when we covered the Indonesia game. But I said, in spite of all that, and then I just kind of went with the form guide against everything that I'd spoken about. And I think if you look, I think Vietnam at this tournament, I think they're a better side than Thailand at this tournament are. I don't think that Thailand have come up against a team so far as disciplined and with such a clear style of play and identity as Singapore.
I agree. I do agree with that. I do agree with that. I think we've watched a fair few of these games. I think Singapore's probably the team that I've watched the most actually in this tournament.
Same.
I don't know. I don't think you've convinced me, but I'm definitely. I know exactly what you mean.
Ultimately, you think it's going to be a narrow Thailand win, right?
Do you think though, if they, I think it's a big shock if they do get through to the final here, though, mate.
I do, and absolutely no disrespect is intended to Singapore in saying it would be a massive shock if they get through, because it would be, and no disrespect is intended to Thailand when I say that I think that Singapore could cause that upset. I think that one thing that benefits Thailand in this is where the second leg is. I always feel like if you've got second leg at home, then you can afford to be slightly more reserved in that first game. You know, Thailand don't need to win the first game. Singapore probably do to go through. So that is a little bit of a counter argument. You know, if Thailand go into that second leg 0-0, they'll feel like they can win at home. Whereas Singapore, I think it's harder for them to win on the road. I'm gonna back. I'm gonna back 1-0 Singapore in the first game, and then 1-1 or 0-0 in the second. I'm gonna back that Singapore defense, that tactical discipline that they've showed to get them through the line. So I am gonna massively buck the DNQ trend in this tournament, which is for us to broadly agree. You're back in Thailand, and I'm gonna be waving the flag for Singapore in this tournament.
Fair. Look, I was gonna say if Singapore set up in a way that closes all the gaps in midfield, forces Thailand to play wide and basically resort to sort of slinging crosses in, that's very bread and butter for Singapore.
Yep.
Will it? Will it? It's easy to say. I'm interested. I'm
It will
interested in seeing
be
how this. Yeah, yeah,
It will
yeah.
be a fascinating game. It will be a
Yeah,
really,
it'd be
really
good.
fascinating game. Why don't you, the viewer, that's right, I'm talking to you. Why don't you get your thoughts, feelings, and comments down on how you think this one is going to go? If you've got this far into the video, thank you very much for watching. Please do consider subscribing and liking. Both are free and help us out a ton. We're loving this tournament and we're really, really excited for this semi-final. We disagree on how it's going to go, but what do you think? We will see you next time.